And now it's always a pleasure to welcome in Douglas Farmer. Look, you and I, we stand on different sides of the equation. A couple different things. One being in basketball, your team is the Timberwolves. You're a big fan of Anthony Edwards. I'm a big fan of the Spurs. Victor Wembanyama, go Spurs, go. But today we're talking Notre Dame, and you and I agree on one thing. We both love Notre Dame. So let's talk about this. You saw the interview with Joe Alt. What do you think about this young man and what he's going to bring to the team this year?
I think there are approximately 131 college football teams who are envious of Notre Dame's left tackle, and there are approximately 132 college football teams who are envious of Notre Dame's tackle duo. It might be the best left-right tackle combination in the country, and that's you and I can debate all sorts of things, including what you mentioned before. But when you get to guys like Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, I mean, Notre Dame's offensive line this year is as big as
It's
ever,
crazy.
and it's led by two likely first round draft picks, and that raises the floor on any kind of ceiling. That's it, literally speaking. Michigan might be okay if they kept their tackles instead of these, but otherwise, there's nobody in the country who wouldn't trade for Notre Dame's offensive tackles.
You think about this new offense. There's a lot of headlines. One of them is Tommy Rees left for Alabama. Tyler Buckner transferred out. We have a new quarterback at Notre Dame, Sam Hartman, coming in, 6th year, coming from Wake Forest. Has all sorts of records, left and right, and left record book in the ACC. And we have a new offensive coordinator, Gerard Parker. So can you just tell me what exactly are your expectations, knowing you have one of the best left tackle, right tackle duos in college football and all these new players around them?
One of my expectations is halfway through the season opener in Dublin this weekend, you will start to realize it's Jared Parker, pronounced like it's spelled with a J. You instinctively, you aren't the
I know.
only
I
one, so I'm
always.
taking these
Oh,
opportunities
thank
to
you. That was my,
educate when I
my bad.
can. And it's going to be very curious to see what offense he runs. He is the former tight ends coach. You assume he's going to want to lean on the tight ends, especially because Notre Dame still has Michael Mayer may be gone, but still has these very talented tight ends and a whole lot of questions at receiver. So is Jared Parker going to lean on what he knows and those tight ends? And how will that work with Sam Hartman, who has this great deep arm? You remember all these records he set, and so many of them were these just perfectly thrown deep balls to A.T. Perry and other Wake Forest receivers. Notre Dame might not have those guys yet, might not have them by season's end, but there are options on this offense to create. It's a question of how you balance Jared Parker's innate tendencies and Sam Hartman's strengths. We have no way to know what that's going to look like till we see it on Saturday against Navy.
Do you think there will be any continuity, between, you think about historically Notre Dame teams, heavy run, heavy tight end. What differences will you expect to see now? I mean, you still got Mitch Evans, like you said. There's some really good players there. The running back room. What are you expecting there?
What jumped out to me during that Joe Alt interview was you asked him, what did Harry Hiestand leave you with? And he said the fundamentals. Then you asked him, what are the differences with Joe Rudolph? And he first said they're very similar. And then he went into some zone blocking conversation. And some of that gets a little technical, but the fact that that's what he thought of suggests there's a change in the offense. And whether that's Jared Parker, whether that's trying to take advantage of Sam Hartman's career and the unique Wake Forest offense, or maybe that's just saying we need to create space for Audric Estime to run into people because Audric Estime is big enough that running into people is an effective strategy. I'm most excited to see how much Audric Estime gets showcased this year because he looks the part, he acts the part, and he had a couple of rough moments last year. He had two fumbles in particular. One cost him a game, and one almost did. And the way he's talked about them, he remembers those. He wants to redeem that little bit. If there is continuity, it's in that you have Audric Estime, use him.
Chris Tyree, now receiver. This is an interesting thing. If you think about this young receiving core, if I looked at the spring game correctly, I saw 3 names as a true freshman potential. Who excites you on that receiving core?
Chris Tyree is the highest ceiling, which isn't what you expect me to say. You're expecting me to say Tobias Merriweather is the highest ceiling. But with Sam Hartman in particular, Sam Hartman's going to hit Chris Tyree in stride whenever Chris Tyree's open. And with Chris Tyree's speed, that's all you need. Tobias Merriweather has the long-term highest ceiling. I mean, we try not to repeat this because sometimes things are so outlandish, you don't repeat them. People say things that are so far gone that you just let them get away with it. But Notre Dame receivers coach Chancey Stuckey this spring, he compared Tobias Merriweather to Randy Moss. You don't
Wow.
do that to a sophomore in college. And he wasn't really saying he could have that career. He was saying he's that fast that he just runs away from guys even when they're at full speed. So Sam Hartman, if Tobias Merriweather takes a step, which we haven't seen yet, and I don't mean just on Saturdays, I mean even this preseason, it doesn't seem like that occurred. If he takes that step, Sam Hartman and Tobias Merriweather could be a perfect combination.
Let's talk about Jaden Thomas briefly, because he has a body type that reminds me of someone like Chase Claypool, who was one of Ian Book's favorite, and also one of his favorite targets. He had some nice catches in the spring game. What's your ceiling on him? What's your take on Thomas?
I always counter that because Jaden Thomas is only 6'1.5". I mean, you've had other network broadcasters mistake him for a tight end, and it's hard to fault them because he's not the big tall receiver. He's just a big receiver. He still has this ability to present such a wide target. It's not to compare him to you. There's 5-6 inches of difference there, but you always have that wide target for a quarterback, and it makes a quarterback's life so much easier. Sam Hartman might be really accurate. He is really accurate. You know what makes him even more accurate? When it's a target that wide. And Jaden Thomas, in my mind, of these receivers we've mentioned, he's the highest floor. He's the guy who this season you can assume 40 catches. I don't know if it's going to be 60, but you can assume 40. That's a nice baseline.
Yeah, I mean, think about all that production. You mentioned Michael Mayer, who's one of my all-time favorite Notre Dame players to ever. I mean, Jeff Samardzija, Michael Mayer. I mean, Tyler Eifert. To me, they're all in that realm for me. I really enjoyed watching him play. Over 60 catches, a lot of touchdowns. Who's gonna? That's a great question from that group. Who's gonna replace him? And also that freshman. I just want to say a couple names: Rico Flores, Jaden Greathouse. Also look for them. Now let's go for defense. When I was looking at the depth chart that was released. Douglas, I am telling you, sixth year, senior, fifth year. It's unbelievable bringing back J.D. Bertrand, Maris Leofau. Where are you looking that's a concern, and where's the strength on that defense?
The concern is I'm not sold on the defensive line. We entered preseason practices with some skepticism around it, and it played well in preseason practices. And you can take that encouragingly because they're going against Joe Alt and Blake Fisher. But I still need to see it against somebody else. I'll believe it when I see it. Like Nana Safamensa, I've always thought he's very good, but he hasn't taken that kind of step. Jordan Botelho has always been very hot and very cold. We'll see if he can get consistency. I'm skeptical there until we see it. The strength, you can mention the 6th year and the 6th year and the 5th year and 3 fifth-year linebackers. The strength is a preseason All-American sophomore cornerback. Benjamin Morrison is that good. And then you combine him with 5th-year cornerback Cam Hart, who if he'd been healthy in December, he'd be in the NFL right now. Legitimately, a November shoulder injury cost Cam Hart the NFL draft. I'm not saying he's an NFL starter right now, but he'd be on a 53-man roster. So that's your number 2 cornerback, a NFL quality player opposite Benjamin Morrison. USC and Ohio State just exploited Notre Dame's defensive backs last year. And to their right, it was there for the taking. They're not going to be able to do that this season, which changes the entire outlook of this year for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman.
What exactly, specifically, concerns you about that defensive line?
It's all the material is there. Riley Mills is massive. Jason Anye he's Riley Mills' backup. He looks like he's really gotten into shape. Jordan Botelho, very physically gifted player.
Yeah, always.
But Jordan Botelho was once sent home in the middle of the summer to decide if he wanted to come back. And that was years ago. But my point is, you need at least one of these enigmas, one of these question marks to level up. I'm not saying replace Isaiah Foskey, but you need somebody that on every snap the opposing team is worried about. When you're replacing 4 of your top 6 tacklers, but you're bringing back 3 linebackers, 3 fifth-year linebackers, there's something there that's missing. And what's missing is a known problematic commodity on the defensive line.
Or just anywhere you think about the ball hawks I've thought about, or just disruptors, I should say, excuse me, because obviously Benjamin Morrison, ball hawk, but disruptor, Kyle Hamilton, where is Kyle, right? You're talking about Foskey. Where is Foskey? So you're saying you don't have someone like that on this defense?
I'm saying I don't know who that is. And the Kyle Hamilton, we always knew. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, broke out. I believe it was his junior year when he finally broke out. And from there on out, you always knew. Right now, I'm not saying there isn't anybody. Jordan Metello could be it. His Gator Bowl performance against South Carolina certainly showed he has that ability. Maris Leofau, assuming he's truly fully healthy, he dislocated his ankle in preseason practices of August 2021. Corey, you know enough to know that a dislocated ankle takes more than a year to really come back from. If he's full go, it could be him, but we don't know that. And I'm a believe it when I see it kind of person. I don't like to project, especially when you get to seniors and fifth years. You're supposed to project with sophomores who haven't played yet. These guys, they haven't shown it yet. Until I see it, I'm not going to believe it.
Just before we look at the actual schedule, because this is, 2 bye weeks. There's a lot of things we could pick out here and salivate over, but I want to ask you, did I miss anything? Anything in particular like jump out at you that I'm looking at the special teams? You have a new punt returner, new kicker, new holder, new punter, and new kicker. Anyone else that you think on that roster that's interesting?
The safeties room is suddenly a strength. It has been a weakness for a couple of years, Kyle Hamilton aside, but you've got 4 or 5 veterans, and it's just going to be a relentless replacement there. And we probably didn't talk about Sam Hartman enough, but there will be a full season of Sam Hartman praise. He's going to be in the Heisman conversation for at least September. Should there be a Heisman conversation in September? No, but he'll be in it.
Okay, now let's look at the schedule, shall we, Doug? So when you look at this schedule, I know I'm going to say this right now. This is the apology tour. You were right. You were high on Clemson last year. I got distracted by Georgia's dominance. I'm going to say this right now on the podcast. Douglas Farmer was correct. Clemson looks scary. USC, Ohio State. Who else where are you looking on this schedule?
Hey, producer Matt, can you do me a quick favor and audio clip that sentence there and send it to my email? I appreciate it in advance. This schedule, it's
don't rub it in. Don't rub it
Ohio
in.
State, getting Ohio State and USC at home is a huge help. Ohio State, there's a quarterback question. We still don't know who their starter is going to be. Today, Notre Dame starts in 4 days. Ohio State kicks off in 11. We should know the starter. USC still, I'm wondering where Notre Dame's defensive playmaker comes from. I'm wondering where USC's defense comes from. So getting those two at home will be very helpful because those are winnable games, more winnable than they were last year. Obviously, Clemson is going to be if you're predicting a loss on this schedule, it's at Clemson. But aside from those you asked, there's going to be hype about North Carolina State, but we're getting them early. Notre Dame is getting North Carolina State before a new offensive system can fully find its groove. Pittsburgh will forever be a headache, but the trendy play, I disagree with it, but the trendy play is going to be at Louisville on October 7th. And part of the trendy play aspect there will be it's the week before USC. If Louisville doesn't look great in the weeks leading up, it's got talent, but that talent has to coalesce still. If it doesn't look great leading up to that, Notre Dame might overlook them. And Jeff Brom, you've seen him. Remember that 2018 Purdue-Ohio State game that October? Rondale Moore just ran all over Ohio State. That Jeff Brom offense always has that possibility. Even when it doesn't look like it's clicking, that's possible.
Quick question for you. I don't want to say I'm scarred, but there is definitely trauma. I was there at Ohio State and I was there at Marshall. And the Marshall loss, I was literally stunned. I was there stunned. Tennessee State at home, coming after this big fanfare in Dublin. A lot of players going maybe out of the country, like Joe said, for the first time. How do you feel about that? Could that be a sneaky game?
I want to say this with the appropriate amount of respect. No, Tennessee State is not. There are FCS teams that are good. There are FCS teams that could be a worry this weekend for that game you're talking about, September 2nd. Tennessee State's not one of them. It's Eddie George has a tough rebuild ahead of him. This is his second season, I believe. Tennessee State is like 214th in the country if you combine the FBS with the FCS. We're not talking about a South Dakota State. We're not talking about a Northern Iowa. Tennessee State, it's going to be a fun weekend. To my understanding, the HBCU aspects are going to be played up, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm way too far down the NBC totem pole to know why Central Michigan's on Peacock and Tennessee State's on NBC proper, but I'm pretty sure it's because Tennessee State's going to be a spectacle off the field and at halftime, and that's going to be fun. But it's not going to be a competitive game, even if Notre Dame is tired from Dublin. It's coming west is the easy part, right?
Like I said, I thought the same thing last year after that first half of OSU. I was thinking, oh wow, like they could have won that game. Notre Dame could have won that game in Ohio State the first half. And then I was thinking Marshall should be a walk in the park. And then there I was with my jaw on the floor at Notre Dame Stadium thinking, I can't believe that just happened. So I really hope you're right. I really do. I hope it's a fun weekend for Notre Dame fans.